afternoon, everybody. I'm Debbie Jenkins. I'm just going to talk through the first couple of slides from our storyboard, and then Tanya's going to do the second couple. Okay. So, really, our project was about improving the experience of patients who were inpatients who wanted to go home at the end of life, and essentially, our teams on the ground, our CNSs and other team members, identified that we were just not achieving a preferred place of care for as many people as we needed to, and that the system was very bureaucratic, time-consuming, and it was that lack of time that was the pressure, because we didn't have time to waste with people with very short prognoses. So we set about looking at the things that weren't right and seeing if we could make some improvements. The things that were really surprising when we first looked at this, we did a little audit of where people were dying. We looked at it in the hospice and the hospital. 38% were dying in their preferred location. 51% were dying in hospital, and 11% were dying in a nursing home or hospice. So we were way below the expected standard. The standard at the time in England was that about 17% were dying at home, when in fact the standard was probably around about 65-70%, when asked, wanted to die at home. And home could be their own home, residential home, nursing home, whatever they considered to be home. And the kind of things that we identified was that the process was bureaucratic, the health and social care support workforce weren't sufficiently skilled up and focused on end-of-life care. We were getting unsafe discharges, resulting in patients being readmitted, so our readmission rate at end of life was high, which is causing a lot of distress. That the inspectorate process meant that people with dementia were unable to stay in their own homes if they were in dementia care, because they weren't registered for end-of-life care, terminal care or palliative care, and were being moved out, which obviously wasn't equitable. The patient experience was very poor. The nursing home staff were feeling, undervalued and de-skilled by not being able to deal with patients that they'd looked after throughout their lives. And we also spotted that there was a complete inequity about who was getting home, that we were managing to get young people who had more resources, family resources, personal resources, home. If you were older, you had less family support, you had much less chance of getting home. And these are not really in any particular order, but these are the areas that we looked at and worked on. We needed a working group, and that consisted of continuing health care, the hospital specialist palliative care team. We engaged with social services and the non-stat providers, so our local hospice providers, our hospice at home providers. We looked at other agencies providing ambulance transport home. That was a big issue, getting people actually physically transported home. We looked at equipment, where the hold-ups were in providing equipment and the funding arrangements for that, whether we needed OT and physio input for some people to get home safely, that sort of thing. We looked at the training needs of people and set up a training element. We looked at the options for people not to go home if they wanted to not die in hospital but not to go home. Were there dedicated beds that they could access? And in doing that, we revised our process entirely, producing criteria for a 7-day prognosis. We limited ourselves to 7 days initially, just so that we weren't over-ambitious and see that we could make it work, and because we needed to submit it to the board for approval, because it would mean a shift of the budget responsibility in order to do it. And so all of those things we did. We didn't identify a need for any additional resources, and we never asked for any additional resources. We felt it was there, but it was just incoordinate. And Tanya's going to tell you about what we achieved by reorganising.
Which one do I press? Clever me. Thank you. In 2008, we had one person discharged via the fast track process. So we started in 2008, October, and by December, I believe it was the day before Christmas Eve, we got one person home through the fast track process, and we were chuffed to bits with that. Year on year, we've seen the discharges to preferred place of death increase over 100%. You can see from 2009, they were 140, 2010, 284, 2011, 454, and to date, well, June this year, we've got over 400 people home, so we will know that by the end of the year, we're probably going to be looking at more of 800 people. We know we've got a long way to go, but compared to where we were, that is absolutely phenomenal. And the way that we've done that really is linking in with our partners, particularly the palliative care voluntary organisations, or those voluntary organisations that will support terminal care at home. That is releasing core NHS staff to deal with what they need to deal with in, either directly in the community or the acute sector, where our voluntary organisations support in the actual physical delivery of the care. The time scale to get people home now is within 6 hours. And within 6 hours, we have a decision and we have a care package set up and the person is discharged home. Generally, we would say 80% go home the same day. The rest, I would say, go home within 48 hours. Those that don't manage to go home actually are too ill to go home. Debbie touched on discrimination, particularly with older people, and certainly Age Concern have done some research into this and have said that the NHS are inherently discriminatory when it comes to older people's end-of-life wishes. And we just wanted to demonstrate for those figures that you've just seen, those in purple, I don't know if you can see that properly, but there's a breakdown on there of the number of older people compared to younger people that did go home. It's not that we suddenly give older people more choice to go home and we chose older people ahead of younger people, but it's just demonstrating that where older people are now engaged in the process and saying where they want to be, we are now facilitating discharge home. And the current impact, we were 38% in October 2008. There's just been some research in England or some findings in England where they said it's less than 17% going home. In January of this year, 99% of the patients in our area that expressed a wish to go home or to another place did so. In February, that was 100%. March, 98%. So overall, our discharge rate for those at the end of life that want to go home now is 98%. Amen. Thank you. Oh, yeah.
Thank you both very much. I'm sure we have some questions from somebody within the floor that we'd like to ask.
Sorry, I may have missed it, but because it's quite far back here and I can't read your slides. But where generally did the patients that go? Did they go home?
The majority, yeah.
So if they're going within 6 hours, how could you get them to a nursing home or some other home?
It works between acute and the community. A lot of the fast tracks come in, they're not just acute fast tracks. It could be somebody's already in at home or they're already in a nursing home.
Okay.
Sorry, Joe, go on.
Can I just ask another question as well? Is the natural progression of this actually to stop these people coming to hospital in the first place?
Yeah, we've had no readmissions from anybody that's gone on the has been discharged via the fast track process. There's been no readmissions, and we're actually getting more and more referrals in from the community for fast tracking to prevent them going into hospital.
Yeah, as part of another separate project which we will link into this that I'm very involved in is avoiding admissions at end of life, and in fact we're already making an impact on end of life admissions with advanced care planning, working out where people want to be and making sure that they stay in their preferred place of care rather than get admitted and then get moved back. So yeah, avoiding admissions is a knock-on benefit. Yeah, we set our criteria, and it wasn't explained on the slide because it was a bit busy, that we weren't going to restrict this from the outset to hospital discharges. This was for anybody in any setting. So if they were in the hospice, if they were in hospital, if they were already in the community, but they'd suddenly deteriorated and they needed that quick input of care, everyone would have access. It doesn't matter where they were. If that was their home and that's where they wanted to be, that's where they would get their care, and everyone could fulfil the same time frames. We should be able to do it within 6 hours.
Well, I think we can learn a huge amount from you in Cardiff then, because
It's
we've
very
got a big,
transferable.
We've got a big problem with this.
I have sent this out widely. It's been sent out all over Wales. We didn't want to be precious about it. I've sent it out to various places in England that have asked for it, and we're very happy to share it. And in fact, I've been endlessly promoting it around conferences in Europe and in Britain, because I think it's a no-brainer. The figures were amazing to us. Would be glad.
Hi, thanks very much for the presentation. It was fantastic to hear. I just wondered, before you started your project, what were the main barriers to getting people home, with palliative care needs?
The first barrier was the amount of paperwork. I mean, those of you that are involved in continuing care will probably know what that looks like. That was no different for anybody going home for end-of-life care. It took 6 weeks probably. Once the paperwork came in, people like myself in complex care would quality assurance think, oh, there's something missing, so we'd send it back. And then they'd send it back, and that wasn't good enough, so we'd send it back. Never did we pick up the phone. And that was the biggest issue. The second one was the resource out there. We didn't know who could support us, really. District nurses were already stretched. We had service level agreements with the voluntary sectors that weren't being used properly. You know, we just didn't know. And I think it took, and there was no delegated budget, so myself in complex care and Sue, my colleague, they would come into us to quality assurance, and that's where it had to stop at that time until it went to a panel. Through this process, the board, or the partnership board at that time, agreed that the nurses in complex care could be given a delegated budget. We had £1,000 per care package, and anything that came in under there, under that the cost was under £1,000, we could agree that without it having to go to board. So the palliative care teams or district nurses would send the assessment in, say this is the care package they need. We would quality assure it, cost it, and say yes. And that stopped. People started moving, very, very quickly. I think the other thing that really helped was that the ambulance service revised their protocols, so they saw fast track as priority, and so did our equipment services. If there was somebody coming through on fast track, the equipment was there. So the barriers, it sounds really blasé.
When you explained it, everybody wanted the same thing. It's just that we'd never really talked to everybody about it. Fair play to the board that did agree. They trusted us not to overspend their budget, and I think we just needed that element of trust. The other thing that wasn't on that slide is that we did build in audit to all of this. I was responsible, along with Rachel, for making sure there was continuous audit, and we audited that first 6 months to see what their survival was, and I think we had an 8.9-day survival for the first 6 months, so we were pretty close to our 7-day estimation. And if you look at all the literature, there is absolutely no standard for prognosis that close to end of life, so we did pretty well. I think our longest survival was about 11 days.
I think it's probably important to say that this isn't just for people 7 days now, because we have the continuing healthcare framework and its terminal phase. It's for everybody that's entering that terminal phase. We've had to do a lot of training locally to make sure people are aware of what a terminal phase is, because CHC paperwork is that big, fast track paperwork is that big, so people were trying to put people through that process when it wasn't really fast track. But I think we've just about got that licked now, and the ones coming through, it is very rare to return anything back, very rare.
I just wanted to ask what happens out of hours. So if someone's identified on a Saturday before a bank holiday weekend.
Yeah, they sat in front of you.
Our ladies tell you the answer to that.
because we knew there was a gap at weekends, we then had to engage the district nurse, senior nurses, and we developed a policy that as long as we put the fast track forms in on the weekend, the district nurses would actually do the personal care till the Monday, where CHC then took over. Again, we worked with the senior nursery equipment, and they again give us a cost code that we could contact Huntley direct, so that we could get a bed in for the same reason. So we can even get people out now on the weekends. And we work 7 days a week, yes.
Okay, well, thank you both very, very much.
Thank you.